Inventors don't always make things that are practical or even useful. Sometimes they design gizmos that appear to be wonderfully frivolous, and then lo and behold, they become important inventions of the future. What we're leading up to, of course, Haley and me, is our next story about a man who plays with bubbles for a living.
You might ask, what is it? Thin metal strips covered with iridescent paint? Or is it a strange honeycomb designed by a 60s rock group? The man who contrived what it is James Ossi. He calls himself a gizmologist. We call him a bubbleologist.
I make machines that present nature. So I'm really a gizmologist, or I'm a maker of equipment, or I'm an exhibit maker or something. Mother Nature is the artist. I just am a tool to present her.
You can find James Ossi's presentations in galleries, museums, and shopping malls in the US and Japan.
This sculpture is basically two planes of glass. So it's as if it's taking a section of a very large foam. Bubbles want to be the absolute minimum shape that they can be. A bubble in air would be a sphere, because that's the minimum shape that it can be and still encapsulate that amount of air. Here, a bubble membrane wants to get from the front surface of the glass to the back surface of the glass, so it's going to form a straight plane. Likewise, these bubbles want to do the same thing.
It took him 15 years to make his first successful model. He spent a week or so experimenting. It wouldn't work, so he would put it down for a year. Finally, weeks and years later, an 8-foot model that worked the way he wanted.
And the first time it worked, I went, wow, that's terrific. These bubbles are only 3/millionths of an inch thick. They weigh almost nothing. But it takes 2,000 pounds of switches and motors and brightly colored wire to make them work. The switches in here operate a bunch of pumps in here. These pumps pump either liquid or air. And then air blows in the bottom through these tubes here, goes in through a few devices on the bottom which actually make the bubbles. The air in there rises, carrying the bubbles up to the top. The bubbles are broken at the top, and the air returns and recycles.
His sculpture is constantly changing, in half-hour cycles, repeating itself, but never quite the same.
The fluid in here is the standard bubble juice that kids can buy at a dime store. And actually, this soap here is diluted quite a bit. There's about 1 part bubble juice to 4 parts water.
At the beginning of each cycle, the clear liquid bubbles appear black and white.
New bubbles are quite thick. They're actually 50 millionths of an inch thick, which seems thin, but that's quite thick as far as wavelengths of a light goes. These are getting thinner just by time and by gravity. The thinner they get, the more they begin to act like tiny resonance chambers for light waves.
And as gravity drains the bubble juice away, the membranes get thinner and thinner. Color is refracted, and the colors mix in iridescent hues that are rare, even in nature.
Iridescence occurs in nature in feathers. It's interesting that feathers are tiny bubbles, and that they cause the iridescence. The same thing with dragonflies. The colors in an opal are due to this kind of resonance.
Ossi's first bubble sculpture is at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where it's sometimes used to teach a branch of science called area minimizing surfaces. His investigation of these fragile spheres of soap and water has brought on some extraordinary proposals.
You could fantasize about billions of basketball-sized glass spheres circling the Earth in rings, much as the rings are in Saturn. And there, since the Earth is tilted, it could cool certain equatorial parts. Here's a building method that's very useful on some remote location, like the Moon or the surface of Mars. If this were scaled up many times, maybe this is how people would build their houses in the future. There's the living room. There's the playroom. A garage. And a place for the sauna.
As we mentioned, you can find James Ossi's bubbles in museums and shopping malls and galleries. What we didn't say, and we don't want to burst your bubble, is that they're very expensive. Some have sold for as much as $100,000.